Do we have users who already completely paid for their devices? And yeah, there's quite a few. They completely paid for their devices with Bitcoin mining. I think that's, it's just, history is kind of telling. Even though the current share of home mining or heating mining is relatively very small compared to the total Bitcoin hash rate, the potential is actually pretty big. Something came in that is not so good for Bitcoin, and that's the centralization of mining. I think the devices within the mass market, that's what's going to start changing the balance. That's when more and more of those terahashes or exahashes at that time are going to start coming from essentially home miners that combine it with heating, who don't even care about the price of Bitcoin. It's a bit like in the evolution, right? You have the survival of the fittest, and with the halvings, the survival of the fittest is something that pushes the miners to become more effective.
But before we get started with all the topics, maybe you can give us a few backgrounds of who you are and give the people a little bit of a background of who you are, and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Sure. So my name is Alex, and I'm founder of a company called Heatbit. I've been building this for the last, it's over 5 years now. Time flies. And I focus on making space heaters that do Bitcoin mining.
And why are you especially excited about Bitcoin?
I think it's a good form of money. I see that the regular fiat money is being printed so much that it actually impoverishes a lot of people. And I think Bitcoin has a very good chance of stopping that. So it's very exciting for me.
Really cool. It's also really interesting for me, the whole Bitcoin mining sphere, because we've come and we talked about that a little bit before we started recording, where we've come from you can mine Bitcoin on basically any computer at home with just like your laptop that you have and you use. And then now we have those huge publicly traded companies that mine Bitcoin in huge warehouses. And now hopefully we get to the point where we can distribute it a little bit more again. Maybe we can start off with a little bit of the evolution of Bitcoin mining and can get then into the implications of that.
Sure. You're absolutely right. It started with just people mining on their computers. You could just mine on the CPU, and it was, at that time, it was powerful enough. And the block was quite a bit bigger as well. And then people started to compete a bit more. I guess that was the whole vision around the mining, because the code for managing increased competition was already inbuilt, right, with the adjustments in the difficulty. And as people started to compete a little more, they started using more powerful computers, and then the difficulty would keep adjusting. And then people realized that, you could actually, instead of using the CPU, you could use the GPU. And that would do the SHA-256 a little faster than the normal CPU. And that was the second computing paradigm, so to say, for Bitcoin mining. And then people started to compete more and started to make something a bit more customized, the FPGAs. So that would be the devices already made pretty much specifically for Bitcoin mining, or adjusted for Bitcoin mining, that would be even more powerful than the GPUs. And then came the ASICs. With the ASICs, it's already very deep in the design when the actual chip is designed specifically for Bitcoin mining. And then it started with the more basic ones, but by now the Bitcoin mining chips are made only at the biggest fabs in the world with the latest technology. So the companies that produce the chips now, they compete with the likes of companies like Apple for the fab time. Like the tech side of Bitcoin mining really evolved a lot. Then on the business side, it was also quite an interesting story. It kind of started with just people mining at home, and it was kind of fun and interesting. And then as the competition kept increasing, one side of the competition would be the advancements in the hardware. So that's the ones I've talked about, right? From CPUs to GPUs, FPGAs, etc. And then on the other side, in this whole Bitcoin mining economic equation would be the energy. Who has the cheapest energy to convert essentially into Bitcoin? And while people were okay to start with just their own home electricity, at some point it started to grow in size, and the economies of scale started to kick in. Right, in a lot of places, if you build a bigger consumer of electricity, you can get a better electric rate. And so it started to grow and grow and grow. And now we came to the point where there are some very big miners that have all sorts of direct contracts, very often direct contracts with utilities to get the best rates. And it really merged with the energy markets quite a bit, because now Bitcoin does consume quite a lot of energy, and it's can coexist and help each other with the energy market, actually. Like, we can get into that topic if you want. But with all this growth in size, and the improvement in the economies of scale with the improvement of energy prices, something came in that was that is not so good for Bitcoin, and that's the centralization of mining. When it started, it was individuals, and it was thousands, later tens of thousands of individuals who would mine on their computers. But now it's most of the mining is done by this huge warehouses full of miners, and that poses quite a bit of a threat to Bitcoin security. Because the bigger you are, the higher chances that someone could collude and do all sorts of things that would disrupt the normal chain, pun intended, of events.
Yeah, the lack of decentralization, not only in miners but also especially in the mining pools, seems to be a bigger and bigger problem. That I think not enough people talk about that. We often talk about nodes, that how important it is to run nodes, and it's kind of also a topic that we have to discuss. And we talk about quantum computing, I think, a lot, even though I think maybe the mining decentralization aspect is even more important to actually talk about. How do you look at the actual threat factor of getting a too centralized Bitcoin mining pools, and maybe also in the mining where we have big publicly traded miners that do a lot of the mining and not a lot of individuals, or I think as Bob Burnett calls them, horses and rabbits?
It poses risks, right? It poses risks from multiple directions. One, it poses risks of an intentionally bad actor, right? Because the nodes are tend and supposed to take the longest chain. If the bad actor starts to direct most of the mining to a particular direction, then it may be possible to control, which kind of kills a lot of value for Bitcoin. So that's one side. But then it also poses risks of unintentional bad actors. For example, we've seen what happened in 2021 when the price went down. You had some very big miners went bankrupt, and a lot of machines had to be turned off. Right, and with the big miners, you look at their balance sheets, and very often they're very highly leveraged, right? Because they need a lot of capital up front to buy the machines, to build the mining warehouses, to secure big contracts with the utilities. And it may work there and then at the time when they sign the contract, but then if Bitcoin price goes down, they could be getting in trouble. And this leverage could mean that this process of getting in trouble could be very, very quick. And then, as the hash rate could be dropping in those events. So what it means is that if let's say a price of Bitcoin drops significantly, it could mean that the security of the network could actually be reduced by quite a lot as well. Whether the miners would want it or not, they will have to turn off their machines because they have to pay the power price, and it's just going to be uneconomic for them to keep mining. So some of the best solutions to this I see is in efforts to decentralize the mining and by bringing it back home. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. And while right now the home mining is probably a very small part of the total hash rate, but that's probably the best solution, because it could be not just decentralized physically, but it could also be some of the most resilient mining where people don't really have to turn off their machines, irrespective of Bitcoin price.
How do you actually? This is something that just came up in my mind with which is sometimes talked about, and I think it's a non-problem because it's very far out, and the fees for transactions will rise a lot. But how do you look at the security budget problem of the mining rewards getting less and more and more dependence on the transaction fees? I mean, I kind of love that transaction fees right now are very low, because I earn in Bitcoin on chain, I spend in Bitcoin on chain multiple times a month, sometimes even like every week. So I do enjoy right now the luxury of having on chain transactions, even if it's not big ones. But do you see that this will actually be resolved in the long run, because just many people will use it as a money? And in that, I sometimes feel like if we have Bitcoin more just as a store of value, and it's just used as a savings technology, and people just have it in their accounts and don't really transact with it, that then it might be a problem long term.
There's a few questions in what you're asking, right? So one is whether people not using the base layer for transaction is a big problem, and the other one is whether it's a big problem for miners or not. So starting with the first one, I guess we would all want to see people using the base layer a bit more, but this is the world we live in, and there's other blockchains that people built, and I think there's a lot more of the actual financial transactions are happening on blockchains like Tron, right? Because I think Tron is the most popular for USDT transfers, and that's just what reality is and what we see. And then for the Bitcoin and the payments in Bitcoin, I think it is upon the people in the community, and there's a lot of great companies out there doing this, to build the tools to enable people to transact either in Bitcoin or some sort of Bitcoin, or some form of Bitcoin, or maybe in what people are used to transacting, like USDT, but on a layer of Bitcoin. Maybe it's the base layer, or maybe it's any kind of L2. Right? There's Lightning, there's Liquid, there's other forms where it could work. So I think we should accept the reality and build the tools to enable people to transact even easier and even cheaper, right? If the fees that you say that the fees are quite low, if the fees were high, it wouldn't really help the Bitcoin network that much. So I'm not really a proponent of like, the fees should be high. No, the fees are, what they are. We should just accept them and build tools to enable people to do more on Bitcoin. Now, coming to the miners, there is the halvings, and the halvings are, it's a bit like in the evolution, right? You have the survival of the fittest. And with the halvings, the survival of the fittest is something that pushes the miners to become more effective. So it pushed the miners with the technological advancements and with the growth of the size and the improvements in energy efficiency of the mining. And now, as the technological advancements, like I mentioned, right, the latest mining chips, the producer of those chips, they compete with companies like Apple. Like it doesn't really go much further in terms of efficiency of those chips. There are still improvements in the energy consumption that are possible, and then the least efficient will die and the more efficient will stay and will keep sustaining the Bitcoin network. The problem could be that this disruption could be happening too quickly. And this is where I'm a little worried, as I see that the most efficient miners, as in the miners that don't really pay the electricity cost, their share is still relatively small. I think we still have a long way to enable the most efficient mining, so that it could keep sustaining the network after 2-3 halvings.
Which makes me think a lot about this efficiency. Like, what happens if Bitcoin is our money and the world where we live in, the base infrastructure of money is hunting for the cheapest electricity, which right now, when we have US dollars or any other form of currency, they don't really hunt for cheap electricity because there's no real connection between energy and the money. But what actually is the implications if the base layer of money of the world is hunting for cheap electricity all across the world, and what are the implications also for the energy market, which is that's over my head. How do you look at that?
I think that's by design, right? The Bitcoin is hunting for the cheapest electricity, and that's one of the things that decentralizes it. There's a lot of people around the world who see, there's cheap electricity in here, maybe I could use it. And a lot of minds are trying to solve that problem because it makes economic sense for them. So it is by design, and is just there, and we have to work with this. The way that we approach this and in what we do is, I think the best or the cheapest form of electricity is when you don't need to pay for it. So this is actually how we started with heating and mining. If you already use electricity for heating, then and you start mining with the same electricity, you get the same amount of heat. You don't use any more electricity for that, but you're also getting the Bitcoin or the Satoshis back as a form of a reward that just goes on top. So that has this beautiful circle of this beautiful virtuous circle of creating just additional benefit out of nothing. And this way, I think it also creates the group of miners, in fact, home miners, that don't really need to turn off their machines irrespective of Bitcoin price, or irrespective of the halving, or irrespective of the fees, because whatever heating that you need, you just turn on your Bitcoin miner to get the heat, and irrespective of all the network parameters or the Bitcoin price, you just get additional reward on top. So that's actually where it makes complete sense. And I hope that us and some of the other people who work in the same problems will be able to deliver the right solutions fast enough so that the devices that we build will be able to sustain the network, the Bitcoin network, well into the future.
Is there any estimates of like how small the share of home miners actually are? I mean, like even beyond maybe heat miners that just like have something at home, or like there's even like the solar miners that sometimes hit a block. But do you know what the kind of the scale of them are? They're probably limited.
It's small. You can make all sorts of estimates, but in terms of the actual home mining or solar mining, it's relatively small. These are, by the way, they kind of the incentives for the home mining and for the solar mining. I mean, for heating mining and for solar mining can be slightly different. But even if you combine the two, it's still a relatively small share of the network, right? The solo miners, when they hit the block, it's kind of all over the news each time. But if you sum up those blocks over the past few years and you divide it by the total number of blocks, it's going to be a very small percentage. I believe it's relatively small with the home mining as well, because there's only a few companies that do that, and for us, it's in the thousands of devices, right? Maybe. And then for there's also people who do DIY kind of home heating mining. That's probably in the thousands, maybe tens of thousands of devices around the world. So that's still relatively much smaller than the total Bitcoin network. But because of the way that the market forces work, like look at the advancements in the chip tech is already hitting the ceiling. It's very hard to keep advancing. They can probably, they went down to like less than 10 joules per terahash. That would be the latest Bitmain machines. And that's already the latest kind of just a few nanometers kind of chips. Maybe they can go to like maybe 8 joules per terahash. Maybe they can go to 5. But I don't really see it going much further unless we start changing completely the computing paradigm, unless we move from silicon to some other completely different kind of computing, using light, using biological substances, using whatever it is. But you can still improve in terms of improvements in mining, this technological paradigm is probably already hitting the ceiling, but you can still improve a lot on the energy, and this is the kind of direction that will lead us to home mining, because even though, answering your question directly, even though the current share of home mining or heating mining is relatively very small compared to the total Bitcoin hash rate, the potential is actually pretty big. So there's different estimates into the size of the power consumption of the whole Bitcoin network. I hear estimates normally between 150 to 200 terawatt hours in total electricity consumed. I can tell you that if you look at just the residential electric space heating, so people who heat their homes with electricity, not taking gas or anything else, that's about 600 terawatt hours. So that's several times the Bitcoin mining. And that's just the space heating. Then people also have they have water heating, they have air conditioning, and it's actually maybe possible to do an air conditioner that mines Bitcoin. And air conditioning is like 2,000 terawatt hours. So the just the residential, I'm not talking commercial, industrial, etc., just the residential electric space heating is several times bigger than the total Bitcoin mining in terms of energy consumption. So, the potential is there.
Then the question is like, if you can just have this device, you put it on there and you have the same electricity cost, as you said before, with just heating with a space heater, and you just get Bitcoin on top, the device probably pays for itself in whatever time frame. Like, why aren't more people doing it? It's just like an education curve, or is there any other challenges towards that?
Why not many people doing that? You mean on the users? Why not many people are using these devices yet, right?
Yeah,
that's okay. I think it's not the education curve. I think in terms of I've seen people doing a DIY with the miners, kind of once people figure it out, they can just do it themselves. I think the problem is the lack of availability of devices. 5 years ago, no one was doing this. 5 years ago, the only home mining, home heating and mining was done by people DIY. There was no company that would do like a professional product. So that's when we started with this. Since then, there's a few companies that popped up. But yeah, and we're a small company. We're like 30 people, but we brought the first properly produced, kind of industrially produced home heater miner to the world a few years ago. There was just no one else doing it. None of these devices were available. I don't really understand why this niche was still there. I would guess that there's like two sides, right? There's the companies that make Bitcoin miners, and then there's the companies that just make heaters. The companies that make heaters, they didn't really think that much about it. Like maybe they don't know much about Bitcoin. Maybe they making fairly complicated electric machines with the chips inside is a bit too complicated for them. But then on the other side, the companies that actually can make the Bitcoin miners, like the Bitmain, etc., they're too busy making industrial miners because, you sell that industrial miner for $2, $3, $5, $10, $20, whatever $1,000, and you make a big buck on sale of a single machine. And they can focus on that, and they're happily making money there. So why do anything else? So there's not that many devices that were available even just a few years ago, and these devices only really started popping up in the last couple of years. I think now it's going to be more and more of those, and you can see the trend that it kind of starts with the pretty expensive devices, and I think this is actually the biggest downside of our mining machines right now. When we sell our heater miners, they are over $1,000 a piece for the top machine, and then slightly cheaper machine would still be around $800 mark, which is still fairly expensive for a home heater. Not everyone would be able to afford it. Not everyone would be able to pay for that. But at the same time, when we look at the performance of our devices and we look at some of our early users, at first we thought, would these machines really pay for themselves? And then would it, just help with some electric power bill? But now we see that there's actually quite a few users because there are actually quite a few users who mined so much Bitcoin that it covered the cost of their machine several times. It's incredible. Like in hindsight, I understand that it actually makes sense, but now but we never really expected that it would happen so quickly. It's kind of amazing.
In what time frame is this, like from the early users that have the machine like for multiple years now, where they are like, or?
Yes. So what happened is these people would tend to live in colder areas, so they would use the machines quite a long time in the year. And that would be, I think, 2-3 years that they've used the machines by now. But at the same time, Bitcoin appreciated over this time. So whatever they mined, at the time that they mined it could be, let's say it was $10, and now it appreciated to, what would it be? 4 years ago, Bitcoin was like 5 times smaller, so now it would be $50, right? So these two effects combined meant that people who bought our machines, or some people who bought their machines from us a few years ago, already paid completely for those machines and kind of keep heating themselves and keep mining Bitcoin and getting additional rewards.
Is there a future where Bitcoin mining is just integrated in many different devices just to passively mine Bitcoin, and it's like a normal thing that houses have devices that just mine Bitcoin in the background just because it makes economic sense?
Absolutely. I think it's the natural step for Bitcoin mining, and I think it's a natural step for a lot of devices as well. Because for the Bitcoin mining, this is the cheapest energy that you can get. As more and more of different kinds of machines are going to become available, I think it's going to be more and more widespread. And also on the user side and on the devices side, if you have a device that you can just use, if you can just use it in the same way and get some rewards on top of that, why not? It all is limited only by the availability of the devices, by our speed and productivity in designing and then manufacturing these kind of devices. I think these are the biggest limits. But we'll do our best to bring more of these to the world.
I do love the watches from Coin Vigilante, but today I have a very special message, not from me, but from the CEO himself, Carlos from Coin Vigilante. Let's hear him.
To all the Robin Seyr podcast community, I'm Carlos Estrada from Coin Vigilante, and we're sponsors of the show, and we're going to give you a very special discount exclusive to you. 10% off your order at coinvigilante.com when you use Robin at checkout. We have really nice watches that you guys can buy right now for 10%. This is a transparency edition, beautiful watch. These watches are worn in over 55 countries and counting. This discount is just for you, exclusive to the Robin Seyr podcast. We have limited editions. We have limited productions. These watches come in very nice packaging, boxing material, and they are collector's item for Bitcoiners only. Enjoy the discount. Thanks for supporting the show and Coin Vigilante.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. You get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use simplemining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. So it's not just about heating devices. Is there any limitations of, like, you even said air conditioner, which it sounds not logic for me, because like an air conditioner wants to like have like cool air, and mining produces heat by a set. How does this work for devices that don't produce heat? Like, I think like most people get the value proposition of a miner runs and it produces heat and you can use that to heat up your home. But how does it work if heat is not needed in the device?
Sure. Well, by the way, before air conditioners, just today I was talking to a friend, and he works on another hardware device, which is like a smoking device. You put whatever substance you want to smoke inside, and kind of heats inside. And I was saying, hey, what kind of temperature do you need? Like, do you want to heat it with a Bitcoin mining chip? And yeah, he kind of got interested. Let's see if we get one of those at some point.
Like a small solo miner to smoke from.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can essentially, it has a battery, right? You use that battery energy to heat up the tobacco, whatever that you smoke, and you smoke it. So you heat it up. It's a regular kind of coil inside that converts the energy contained in that battery into the heat that then kind of burns this tobacco and then you smoke. So if you could do it with a Bitcoin mining chip, why not? I wouldn't say that there's like a huge economic benefit to it because one Bitcoin mining chip is not going to produce that much, but why not? There's quite a few of the solo miners that managed to catch the block with a single chip machine, so it could be quite fun.
Maybe better to do it that way instead of playing the lottery.
I'm not sure if people would see it negatively because it, kind of promotes you to smoke more, but I think it's people's choices, right? Like we should stop encouraging people to do A or B and let them live their own lives. So yeah, and answering your question about the air conditioning, it is possible. Actually, it is possible to produce cold or coolness with heat. You have a process called absorption cooling, and you don't see it that often, but you might have seen it with fridges that are installed in hotel rooms. Have you ever noticed that those fridges are very often completely silent?
Oh yeah, like they usually don't make I actually never noticed that because when I have guests over in the living room, there's always the fridge that I'm concerned about that is kind of loud. But in hotel rooms, actually, but they usually are smaller. Usually, like I only have those small ones. Are they differently cooled?
Yes. Well, there's different ones, but some of them are cooled in different ways. So the regular way that a fridge would work, it would use the compressor. And then that compressor on one hand, and then it would use the relationship between pressure and heat on the other. Kind of you compress something, it kind of heats up, then this heated substance goes to the outdoors. So with air conditioner, that would be the unit that's outdoors. It's cooled down, so equalized with the outside temperature, and then it goes back up in. And then the temperature is decreased. And when the temperature decreases, it becomes colder. Right. So that's how the fridges work. That's how the air conditioners work. Now, there's a slightly different way is when you use a heat source and absorption cooling. It's kind of similar to how you use it with a compressor, but instead of using the compressor to increase the temperature and kind of move it outside and cool it down, you use a source of heat. And it's what often is used in fridges that are installed with hotels, because this process, unlike compressors, is nearly silent. It's less efficient from the energy and the physics standpoint, as in it uses more electricity to create certain amount of coolness. But at the same time, it's silent, and that's why it's used with hotels. So same way Bitcoin mining could be used for that.
Interesting. So the heat can also be used just as basically as a power source, or almost in many different ways. It's interesting, and therefore there are no real limitations to where you can put Bitcoin miners in devices. There's you can literally then put it in everything.
Yes, the limitation is, like I said, it's the availability of the device. It's still a lot of work, right? To kind of rethink the device, to resolve all the barriers that you meet along the way, the supply chains, etc. It's a hard business. But once it's resolved and once it works and people start liking it, there's no stopping at this point.
Love it. It's so interesting. I think the Bitcoin mining space is one that will surprise a lot of people in the next 5 to 10 years, what's possible and how integrated it will be. Because most people, and we talked about that, most people talk about the implications of an economic system like Bitcoin. What can that do? Deflationary system. Where's Bitcoin going? How fast is Bitcoin growing? And all those kind of questions, I think, are very well discussed within Bitcoin and all the financial aspects of that. But there's a whole technical aspect of Bitcoin with Bitcoin mining and an energy aspect with Bitcoin mining that isn't that well known, discussed. And we also talked about before that Bitcoin mining, at least is my experience, that people don't click or watch those Bitcoin mining topics as much as they do certain other topics. And I think there's a whole host of possibilities in there that are super, super positive and good for the Bitcoin adoption overall. And one thing I just want to throw in there, I think it's from a political standpoint very hard to argue against Bitcoin mining when you see all the interesting applications for the energy market and how it can stabilize grids and how it can do great things for the energy market, which is kind of funny because like 2-3 years ago, the mainstream was like, oh yeah, like Bitcoin mining will destroy the planet. And now the argument shifts more and more of like, yeah, we need Bitcoin mining. Even if you hate Bitcoin mining still makes sense from an energy market perspective.
Oh, yes, because Bitcoin mining can always be a consumer of energy. And you even have cases with, do you know a company called Gridless?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so this is the case where, from the development standpoint, sometimes it makes no economic sense to build a power plant in a certain geography because there's not enough power consumption. And there could actually be not enough power consumption because, well, there's no power plants, there's no electricity, so people don't have electric devices. Right? So it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem. But then what you could do is you say, well, how about I build a power plant and I use most of this power at first, at least, for mining Bitcoin. Then you start having the electricity available and people can start buying more of the electric devices, and it really helps the development of a certain area. And Bitcoin mining is there to kind of kickstart the process. And then, if you start having a lot of people using the electricity naturally and kind of competing for that electricity, you can go to another geography and do the same thing with the same miners. I think it's a great application where Bitcoin mining really helps the development of some of the areas on the planet. I think I really like the case, and I really like what Gridless does. So that's one. But then there's actually an interesting approach to when you're going to start talking about Bitcoin and you start introducing people to Bitcoin. Most of the people get into Bitcoin with the idea of speculation, I believe, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to buy something, it's going to grow in price, and then I'm going to be rich, kind of ideas. And as history shows, then some people, will love it. Some people will hate it, depending on where the price goes. So when people are introduced to Bitcoin through the price, there's a pretty big churn. Because sometimes Bitcoin price goes down and then people are unhappy and that turns into churn. But if you introduce Bitcoin to the people through home mining, when you're like, well, it's the heater, it's like a Dyson, works like a Dyson, uses the same amount of energy as a Dyson, doesn't make any more noise. It's like a Dyson, but it's going to make you some Bitcoin. It's always net positive. Like there's just, let's say Bitcoin price goes down. Fine, you earn a little less in dollar terms. Same, and actually more in Bitcoin terms. Bitcoin price goes up, you're even more happy. But it's always net positive. And I think the home mining could be a much better way to introduce people to Bitcoin rather than just the price and the speculation.
It's a good point because it's you only win. Especially once the device kind of paid for itself, and you also have to remember a normal heater without Bitcoin miner also costs something. So
exactly. That was my question. How long does it take for a Dyson to pay for itself? Maybe a few hundred years, maybe more.
it probably never pays for itself.
Exactly.
How actually are I've never bought a space heater. It was always in the apartment somehow integrated. How expensive are those, and are the ones with Bitcoin mining actually so much cheaper that people are turned off by higher prices of the heaters with Bitcoin mining?
We tend to price our devices somewhere closer to the premium heaters. So Dyson would be a good example. We tend to price them around the Dyson price, maybe slightly higher. And I think that's a major limiting factor because not everyone buys a Dyson, right? They're still fairly expensive. They're still like I mentioned, like around $1,000 a piece. So we have models from like $800 to $1,300. But these are premium devices, right? They're built as premium devices because they're kind of, they need to compete with Dyson. And I really hope that we'll soon be able to introduce the much more of the mass market models. So if you're thinking of buying a Dyson, buying a Heatbit could be an easy choice. But I want to make sure that if you're thinking of buying a cheap heater, buying a cheap version of a heater that does the mining could be an easy choice as well, because that's could really increase the volumes. And this balance you were asking me about, how much of mining is done at home with home miners that is combined with heating, etc. And I'm saying it's very small. I think the devices within the mass market, that's what's going to start changing the balance. That's when more and more of those terahashes or exahashes at that time are going to start coming from essentially home miners that combine it with heating, who don't even care about the price of Bitcoin. So, and that's going to be the most resilient mining. That's when or if things go really badly in terms of price, and every once in a while it tends to happen. They're not going to turn off the devices, and Bitcoin network will keep running on those devices as nothing.
One question that probably everyone that considers such a device will ask is like, oh, how many Bitcoin can I make with home miner? And is there some estimates of like, depending on how big the device is, obviously it depends also on the mining market, and kind of estimations of like how much you actually can make and how fast you can kind of get the cost of the device itself again in there?
Sure. So let me just talk about our current model, maybe. So the current model that we just introduced to the market a few months ago, it's called Heatbit Maxi. We retail it at $1,300, and it's about 40 terahashes, close to 40 terahashes. Now, 40 terahashes makes you just over $60 a month. So 1,300 divided by 60, that's 22 months of the device working. Now, how many years of work that is, it depends on you, like, and how much far north do you live, etc. How much heat do you need? But at the same time, you still get a premium. Have you seen this? Huh? You still get a good premium looking device with like a leather strap and all that stuff. So, if you consider that a Dyson costs, let's say a similar Dyson, which by the way is made of plastic, Dyson costs $800, then you're overpaying, or over a Dyson, you're overpaying $500. Now, if you divide 500 by the $60 that you're making with mining, that is, about 8.5 months. That's less than two seasons, and that doesn't take into account the tendency of Bitcoin price to go up. Like I mentioned, like we don't look at it daily, but once we looked at like, hey, how do we have users who already completely paid for their devices? And yeah, there's quite a few. They completely paid for their devices with Bitcoin mining. I think that's it's just history is kind of telling.
Which is amazing as an argument, especially like if it has, I think, the potential as a product to go. I don't like the word, but I think it's the best word. kind of viral because people buy it, it heats the home, and they're like after a year, like, or after 1-2 years, depending on the season and how, how cold of an area you live in, they're like, hey, I got now more money out of that thing. So that thing now starts paying my electricity bill. So now all of a sudden, I get almost free electricity, or my electricity bill gets reduced in a sense. Those are the news that tend to travel fast with neighbors and with colleagues and with families. We're like, hey, like I have that space heater, like it paid for itself after 2 seasons, and now it reduces my electric bill.
Now imagine this heater start catching solar blocks, and then there's someone out there who so it doesn't just pay for electricity; it paid for a Lambo.
But can users decide themselves on like where to connect to like different pools and the payout scheme and all of that?
Yeah, exactly. We in our first models, we only had one pool connected. But that was not out of the intention. That was just a development limitation, right? We wanted to have a very smooth experience for people to start with. And it took us a bit of time to integrate all the other features so that people could just choose their own pool and do solar mining, etc. So that's already available on our devices. And then on the common devices, it's going to be not even just pool or solar. People could be able to do both. So you could kind of send part of the hash rate to solar mining, with this kind of lottery ticket kind of thing, and part of the hash rate you could send to a pool to have a more regular, small but regular payouts.
That's super interesting. I think one thing that I want to touch on before we come to the end of the podcast is the implications that money and energy somehow is connected now. We talked about that before, where you have the fiat currencies, you have the current monetary network, which is the best connected maybe to a military act of the state, is also somehow connected to energy, I guess, in a very indirect way. But now we have money and energy directly connected, and there's a market there. What are the biggest implications of that you are looking at?
Thinking. Interestingly, I think there is something in here around spreading the wealth equitably around the world. So if with the fiat currency, the backing of that fiat currency, that's people with guns. That is pretty concentrated around just a few countries. There's only a few countries that have nuclear weapons, for example. But in terms of energy, because electricity is so prevalent in our society, it's essential for our society operation, for the last 50 to 100 years. Electricity is almost everywhere. And if availability of electricity would mean that you have this better form of money available and you have kind of more influence over it, that in some way distributes the benefits around the world much better. I think that could be the implication, the connection.
This is super interesting. I think this is it's also super fun to talk about this energy rabbit hole, because I have not a lot of clue about energy, but I got a lot more clue about energy just because talking to Bitcoiners, and that's just I love that there are so many adjacent topics in Bitcoin that have traditionally no connection to money or finance. Like if you listen to, I don't know, stock podcast or a real estate podcast, it's a very different feeling to a Bitcoin podcast where we talk about energy, about parenting, about low tide reference life, and all those different topics. So I do love that. And on that note, we have one question to ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Maybe just something about entrepreneurship and starting things, especially with hardware. Like if you want a short piece of advice, start your own business only if you don't mind pain. Who was that? I think it was Elon Musk. Who was like, "Oh, who said how is it for you to run a startup?" And he was like, "It's like chewing glass." And very often, I think it's true. So you should have enough drive to kind of chew glass sometimes, and enable your team to kind of do the same along with you. And then if you're thinking of doing something in the hardware area, let me tell you that don't call it hardware for nothing. Each time I have to go to, let's say, some event, and I need to bring one of our devices to an event. I envy all the software people when I carry it and put it on the plane and carry it, and it's kind of heavy. So they don't call it hardware for nothing.
I just got I co-founded this Microseed thing, this self custody device, and I was before completely in the digital world, and I loved it. You like the only real limiting factor then is service and marketing. But all of a sudden, like, you have to pre-order stuff, you have to ship it, you have to manage the supply chain. Then all of a sudden, like, one part gets like twice as expensive because did something happen. Then you're like, okay, can we manufacture it ourselves? Like, all of these weird questions that I haven't even thought about 2 months ago. Now I'm in this startup since about 2 months, and it's going really good. But it is, I full-heartedly agree and understand what you're saying, but I only understand it since two months. So I'm looking forward to what I will learn on the hardware, and our thing is way more light and smaller. So like it's just like a small box and some metal.
It's hardware wallet, right?
It's a backup device for backing up your seed phrase. So like just very short. You have that thing, and then you can stamp your seed phrase on a washer. And so we have some punches, the jig, and some titanium blades, like some titanium washer. So it's very lightweight. It's still metal, like it's not completely lightweight, but compared to a heater, I guess it's still easy to do fulfillment centers, and the cost is less than that.
Yeah. You know the pain.
I'm starting to know the pain. I'm at the very beginning of chewing glass.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes there's customs as well,
This is the big thing that we're currently. I mean, I don't want to make the podcast about that now, but we're currently looking at EU fulfillment, because if you buy it in the EU, all of a sudden it adds like a 50 or 60 euro cost just because of import taxes and customs and all of that. But I can feel your pain a little bit more than I could have felt it 2 months ago.
Well,
But yeah, really cool. Thank you so much. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question: how can the benefits arising from Bitcoin adoption at the individual level help communities and regions become stronger and more resilient?
Could you repeat the question? It's kind of long.
It's kind of very long, yeah. I will summarize it, because as I read it out loud, I was like, I did not understand it. But it's basically the impacts of Bitcoin outside of the monetary thing. So what are the benefits, the positive advantages that Bitcoin will bring to communities and regions to make it stronger? I guess gridless is a really good example.
I think uniting people and unifying people around common topic or common causes is another thing, right? There's so many different cultures and languages around the world, but Bitcoin is kind of similar in many languages, and I've seen very often how it brings together very international communities, and it's kind of that the Bitcoiner culture is that part of culture that unites people from very different ethnic, very different economic backgrounds, And I think that's one of those benefits.
It will be interesting to see because now if you, for example, live in Austria and you drive a little bit up, you're like all of a sudden in Czech and you have a different currency. Like it's completely. And if you drive a little bit down, you have a whole different currency. It's weird how those barriers are still here in 2025, and it's about time that we use Bitcoin. So thank you so much, Alex, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you and ask you questions?
People can find me. I think Twitter would be the best. It's at Alex_Heatbit would be my Twitter. I think that would be the best way to reach out.
Awesome. Then thank you so much for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.